everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. We're on season 2, episode 2. Woo! This podcast might be a little more somber, but we're going to try to also make it educational, interesting, and a little more lighthearted. But we're speaking about fire safety in families, particularly families on the autism spectrum, and managing fire safety. And we're doing this almost a year ago. September 26th was the passing of Theta and Mu, a family, a mom and a young man on the autism spectrum who tragically passed away in a fire. I have spent the last year working with some members creating a website and informational facts and tools for families and kids with autism. But Jen and I really wanted to take it a step further. And so we're doing this podcast about fire safety and autism. We have a special guest. I will say that, as always, we're trying to make it also an educational learning experience. So we will be identifying some ABA terms off the BCBA task list for those BCBAs listening for CEUs. And we're specifically going to talk about the role of ABA providers in helping families be safe for fires. And one thing that comes to mind for myself is if I'm looking at the task list, when we are conducting a preliminary assessment of the client in order to identify the referral problem, I personally feel safety should always be a part of that, particularly for our population. So with that being said, Jen, my trusty companion, is with me, and she's going to introduce our special guest we have today for this topic. Hi, Jen.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Yes, obviously, this is a really important topic for us, and I knew the family as well, so it's definitely a personal thing as well, because it was just so shocking and scary. So it's so important for us to talk about this. And when we were thinking about who we would want to have on, I couldn't think of anybody better than my friend John. John is such an amazing person. He's an amazing firefighter. He is an amazing father, husband.
Usher John.
Friend. I met John actually several years ago. And it's kind of wild because he actually reached out to me, and we had both had booths at a Special Olympics event, even though I was just a volunteer at that point with them. But I was working with Autism Speaks, and John was a lifesaver to me, and we became super good friends. He brought an entire crew and continues to do so year to year to set up the biggest walk in actually the nation and organization for Autism Speaks at the Rose Bowl that has attendance of about 55,000 people. And if it wasn't for John and his crew, they literally single-handedly set up the entire walk for me and broke it down. And not only did we get to spend a lot of time with that, but we spent several events together, including some fun ones and a lot of autism awareness nights with just all over the place. And then he continues to help me now that I'm at Special Olympics. And I gotta say, he's my go-to and my hookup with Smokey the Bear.
Is that how you get Smokey the Bear to the event?
It's this guy right here. And I gotta say, it's kind of interesting because we've had a lot of different characters at a bunch of different events, but when our athletes or anybody sees Smokey the Bear, they literally come charging across fields and stuff to give Smokey a hug. But I really mean it, John. You're such an amazing person, and I know that you have your personal connections, and that you will completely, both professionally and personally, understand why this topic's so important to us. So thank you, John, and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
John, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself? for our
Yeah,
audience?
sure. So 20 plus years in wildland fire. Uh, I'm a fire prevention patrol captain here locally in Los Angeles on the Angeles National Forest. Um, over 20 years doing that. And more recently, in the past 10 years, 12 years, my primary focus has been on fire prevention and education, which goes to Jen mentioning Smokey Bear and my taking him around the community and educating folks on fire prevention. I am married with 4 sons. One of my sons is on the spectrum, and he's doing fabulous. Just went into the 7th grade at our local high school. So that's been a great transition for him, going from the elementary school to the high school. He's loving the independence.
That's awesome. So we want to pick your brain. I know that I'm part of a committee that created a website for families with information of sort of like, the main steps to do, which would include having a working fire alarm, right? Having a working fire extinguisher, having an exit plan. But you're the expert. If you were talking to a group of families now, what happens is, in my perspective, it's totally my opinion. And I have to give a code word, and the first code word is Smokey the Bear. Code words is that getting out of the house, particularly for more severely impacted kids and adults on the autism spectrum, is a challenge in itself. And then I also know a whole host of families who don't practice because the fire alarm sound is so aversive and to the kids, so they don't want to create challenges. And so if you were talking to a group of families with children on the autism spectrum, what would you tell them about how to, what do they do? What should they be prepared for? How should they have their house ready?
I would say that I would communicate that preparation is the key. Like any situation, practicing and preparing for a fire or any emergency. It's not just limited to fire, but especially here in Southern California, earthquakes and that sort. To prepare and practice for that event is key. To allow an individual on the spectrum to not only go through the practicing and preparing, but to participate in the preparation and involve them in the preparation is key. There are quite a few things that you can consider. You mentioned the smoke alarms, which is a big one, and in my field of wildland fire, that goes hand in hand with the sirens that we have on our trucks.
Good point.
The smoke alarms, it's not just the sound necessarily, because when I think about it, I don't just think of it as an event that's taking place or could take place in the home. It could also happen at school. It could also happen in a retail store. It could happen anywhere. And all these places, they have their smoke alarms, and those smoke alarms don't just have the audible stressor that's taking place. A lot of them have the strobe lights as well. Mm-hmm. And that visual can be very distracting and uncomfortable for folks. So the preparation and planning is key. And with that, I would say having either earmuffs, earplugs, headphones with favorite music, that sort of thing, ready to go in the event of an emergency, that an autistic individual is able to put on and at least drown out that loud noise, and then become creative with the visual aspect of it, of any strobe lights and fire engine lights and that sort. Because when the moment takes place, it's going to be extremely chaotic for everybody involved, but especially autistic folks. There are extra sensory aspects that we have to consider, and so preparing and planning for those moments is best.
Yeah. A lot of times I hear families say that's the last thing they can think of, right? And in my mind, I know, Jen, for you, that's like the number one thing you think of. You always think of Dylan's safety first. And when I've gone around and talked about this topic, parents say to me, I'm so frazzled. That's the last thing I'm going to do. And when the fire alarm goes off, it's so upsetting to my child anyway. I don't want to create a problem. But I mean, Jen, talk on that, because I know you practice with Dylan. How often?
Yeah. Well, I am fortunate Dylan doesn't have auditory issues. He actually kind of likes it. And he loves sirens and stuff. So, I mean, I gotta admit,
I can picture him doing his happy dance.
I'm cooking and goes off. He kind of looks at me like, that's annoying. Do something about that. So that's not really an issue. My fear, like, we have a plan. I try to, I try to practice with him. My fear for my particular situation, first of all, is that we have a 2-story house.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. And that Dylan is a big dude, and that's size big D. And he is when he actually sleeps, he's a very deep sleeper. And my concern is like being able to wake him up, but not just wake him up, like, actually, if I have to physically, like, like get him down the stairs. And we've talked about it, Kelly, and maybe John, you have suggestions, but I even have game plans of, with his window, like the garage is right under, we have an extra mattress in case we had to jump out. I have the stair thing under his bed that, we could put over. And then the idea of like a heavy blanket if I had to, and put him on it and try to drag him down the stairs. Like, those are the things that I am fearful about, is like, I don't think he would, he's pretty smart on the big things. Like, he understands, like, I think, safety, and like, if something's scary, like if I tell him like, hey, if we got to do something, I think he would, comply with that. But I'm just worried, like, what if he's like totally asleep or something, or, something happens that I have to physically do something. So do you have any suggestions on that, John, or does that sound like a okay plan?
It does. It really does. It's individualized, just like our IEPs. Every family, every situation is going to be individualized. I think it sounds like you planned it out pretty well, and you have actually a handful of contingencies to deal with. I don't have anything specific. I think that if he is familiar with it, and you have smoke alarms placed around the house that give you an earlier heads up, to give you that additional time that you might need to get him in a situation where he's comfortable moving out of the house, I think that would pay dividends.
So that's come up a lot, John. And I talk about Jen's strategies quite a bit. A lot of families that I know that have second floor bedrooms, and I'm certainly not trying to capitalize on this family story, but I've spent quite a bit of time with the sisters, and they have shared that he couldn't go down the stairs. He wouldn't go. And he's a big guy, and they didn't have a plan to get out the window. And the thought was, would he have even done it? And Jen and I have always laughed. We always said, like, we'll take whatever it takes, push Dylan out that window, because he's going to land on the mattress, right? But that might not be an answer either, for second story family bedroom.
Mhm.
Any other and I'm going to add our second code word is going to be individualized. Just like as BCBAs, when we're doing intervention plans, this is all part of the individualization, is working with the family where they're at to get their child safe. So sorry, John, like any other thoughts around that second floor?
Um, nothing that hasn't been mentioned already. Keywords or interest goals. Maybe there's a key phrase or a key interest that can be used to prompt him to get down the stairs faster, out to the front yard faster. I I'm not. I don't want to encourage any white lies or misleadings or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if it's an emergency, it's an emergency, and if it was my son, I'm going to do just about anything I need to do to get him to a safe area, and then mitigate any confusion after that. But no, it is going to be individualized, as we're all familiar with. No two situations are the same.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to mention this before. There are smoke alarms that are talking smoke alarms, and not the siren smoking alarm, smoke alarms. So that some people might benefit from that.
We did add that. We made a list of resources and we added that as a potential.
Nice.
I've had there was some research that suggested folks with developmental disabilities responded a little better than that. But I've also had some families say they didn't want to do that. And they weren't as effective. And I think the individualization is so key, like you say, because whenever we do talk about different strategies, I often hear families say that wouldn't work for my child. And so trying to have to figure out what works for their child. What do you think about
I might, if I could just jump in. I just thought of something additional is, and we're all guilty of it at some point or another, but when there is an emergency and an incident is taking place, again, it's chaotic, and we all tend to, in our own ways, panic to some degree. If we can minimize that and be as conscious as we can of that, when we're waking them up, when we're notifying them and alerting them that we need to initiate this evacuation or get out of the house, if we can be conscious enough to do that as calmly, rationally, as concise as we can, using the least amount of words, feeding the least amount of information to them at any given time, to keep the input, the information load as minimal as possible. That would help them process what needs to take place. I think a little better. Again, it's individualized, but food for thought.
I think that's so smart because in general with Dylan, he really feeds off, my reactions and my emotions. And I just actually with, also the anniversary of 9/11, I've been watching a lot of documentaries and things, and a lot of them have to do with the fires. And I watched one in particular, I just thought was really just like you're talking about. It was a colonel, a female speaking, that got a lot of people out of the Pentagon during the fire.
Oh, wow.
And she was just saying, just like you did, she said, I knew I couldn't freak out. I knew I had to be calm. And I like very short and be like, because people just were scared, they didn't want to leave, and that she just said, you need to follow me, you need to come with me, I know you're scared, we need to do this now, and we got to get out. And she just kept saying that. And like, I think with Dylan, or a lot of kiddos that I've worked with or know, that that would be a good strategy, because obviously if you're freaking out, of course it's hard not to in an emergency, but the more you can keep it together, And I think we experienced that even at the walks, when we had kids missing and things like that. We tried to keep everybody calm and, work it out. And, knock on wood, it always worked out. But I think that's really smart.
It's extremely difficult. It's not an easy thing to do because when these events take place, we're all being blindsided by it.
Yeah.
And so the natural tendency when you're full of confusion and chaos is to panic to some degree. But the more we stay conscious of that and we remember that when it's taking place, the more I panic, the more they're going to be scared and frightened and confused. So let me try and bring as much calm and simplicity to this situation as I can to them, because the sooner I can have them out of the house and safe, then I can maybe think about some other things.
One thing I learned that I did not know in this whole process was the effectiveness of keeping doors and windows closed in the event of a fire.
Mhm.
It's true. Fire feeds off of oxygen, and once it's been burning in a room for enough of time, it's sucked out as much oxygen as it can from there, and it wants to feed off of more oxygen, and it's going to travel itself to areas with more oxygen. Absolutely.
I did not even know that. And it as I've learned all of this through this work, if there's a fire downstairs and you close the bedroom door, I mean, you can tell us it reduces the amount of time you can stay safely, tell me if I'm correct, in that bedroom for help to arrive if you can't get out. Is that true to say?
Sure. With a towel underneath the door as well.
Got it. Okay.
Because it's moving towards freshly oxygenated rooms, it's going to take the path of least resistance. So the smoke is going to make its way under the door. So putting some towels under there and
Pillows, blankets, if you're in a bedroom.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. John, so I live right by, it's literally on our street, the Orange County Fire Authority, right? And it's huge. They have open houses. So I've taken the boys there like every year since they were kids. One thing that I hear a lot too are, you would think that, because you guys are so awesome and in the gear, that, that people would be excited, or not excited, but like more open to if there's a situation like you guys coming in. But there are a lot of individuals and children that, especially our kids, because you're coming in, you're wearing all this gear, the sensory issues, like the smells, the sounds, all that can actually make someone want to go hide. Have you experienced that? And for our kids, are there any suggestions you think it is good to expose them also to, our first responders, and, have them experience as much as they can to, if you're ever in this situation, to understand that this is someone that's here to help you?
Right on, Jen.
That's a wonderful question you're asking, and a topic that you're bringing up, and it goes back to the preparation and planning. Absolutely. Everybody should seek out their nearest firehouse in their community and schedule. It doesn't have to be a planned open house necessarily. You can call, you can stop by there, talk to the local captain, and schedule a visit. And sometimes it's better this way rather than a large group of individuals when it's loud and whatnot. But schedule a visit and go there for many reasons. You keyed in on a very important thing, is the familiarization of the apparatus that are going to be showing up, the gear that we're wearing. One thing I've learned or heard quite a bit is let the autistic individuals and the caregivers and the parents, let them know that when the firefighters do come into the house to save them, to help them, to carry them outside, to get them to safety, they're going to be sounding like Darth Vader.
Mhm.
Hmm.
They're not gonna sound like
Good point.
they're used to people sounding. They're gonna sound like Darth Vader because they have the mask on, the respirator and whatnot, and they're not going to sound as common. So to have the local firehouse demonstrate that in the safety of a quiet firehouse and environment, a couple times, not even just once, but a couple times, then if and when the time comes, there'll be some familiarization. They'll know that this isn't a stranger. This isn't, a bad situation. This person is here to help me. I remember them, and they can reflect on that. Also, some firehouses, you'll have to check with your local one. Some firehouses have resources such as window decals
Mhm.
that you can place on the windows of the children's rooms that identify to firefighters that, okay, this is I believe they call them toddler toddler stickers,
Mhm.
toddler find. Firefighters can identify the specific rooms where children most likely are sleeping or would be, which is beneficial. Also, some firehouses, they're able to give local resources um, that folks can use to better prepare their homes. Some of them have smoke alarms um, and that sort. So you touched on a great thing that everybody needs to consider, and that is visit the local firehouse and find out. And for our own personal interests, find out if that firehouse has been trained to deal with individuals that are autistic and whatnot. Have they been? They have. That's great, reassuring. More resources possibly. If they haven't been trained, then maybe you can volunteer to give their firefighters 15 or 20 minutes on a weekend of discussion, or open up the idea to them and enlighten them. Let them know where you live, your address, how many folks are there, that sort of thing. That there's an autistic individual in the home that could hide, could hide in emergency, could bolt, could wander, and that sort of thing. So great thing to bring up, Jen. I'm glad you did.
Me too.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And as ABA providers, if it's not in our scope of competency, we should seek out information, because we're with families all the time, bulk of hours. And I feel very strongly that we need to help families work through and create these individualized plans. All right. Thank you, John. It was so
Thank
awesome
you.
to have you. Jen,
You're the best, John. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
inviting John. And we'll be back next week.
You guys rock.
Thanks.